There's a specific kind of exhaustion that has nothing to do with sleep. It's the exhaustion of working 3 jobs, counting quarters in a parking lot at 3 in the morning, eating cold noodles off your dashboard, and telling yourself every single day that it's fine. You're fine. That was my life. And somewhere across town, while I was rationing gas money to make it to my next shift, my grandfather was sending me $7,000 a month. For nearly 4 years. I never saw a single dollar. Before this story goes any further, take 1 second to subscribe. Because what happened at one birthday dinner, at a table full of candles and roses and family smiling at each other, will stay with you long after this video ends. My name is Grace. I was 31 years old. I was an emergency room nurse on nights. I picked up agency shifts on weekends. I taught a CNA certification class on the side. And on the mornings when all 3 overlapped, I'd sit in my car and do math that never added up. Not patient math. Gas math. Can I make it across town on what's left in the tank? I had student loans I'd taken on myself. No safety net. No one to call. I had built a wall around the word help, so thick and so high that I couldn't have asked for it even if I'd wanted to. The night this story really begins. I clocked out of the ER at 3 in the morning, sat in my car under a buzzing light, and opened a container of cold noodles. 2 hours earlier, I'd run a code on a man whose heart had stopped in a grocery store. My hands had been perfectly steady the whole time. They always were. At work. My phone lit up with a text from my mother. Sunday dinner. Grandpa's coming. I read it twice. Felt something low and cold turn over in my stomach. He was the gentlest man I knew. Seeing him should have been the best part of my month. But something about those words sat wrong. The way a patient's vitals look fine on paper, but your gut says something's off. I told myself it was the gas gauge. It wasn't. Sunday dinner was at my mother's house. The house my father built before he died. I came straight from a shift, still in scrubs. My sister Sloane arrived glowing from a recent vacation, a new bag on her arm that cost more than my car payment. Her husband Trent moved around the room like a man who had never once lost a bet. My mother looked me up and down and sighed. You always manage to look so hard done by, Grace. I let it go. Letting things go was a muscle I'd been building my entire life. Then the front door opened, and my grandfather walked in. 80 years old. Still standing like a man who'd poured concrete for 40 years, which he had, before he built a company out of nothing but early mornings and stubbornness. He crossed the room straight to me, hugged me until my spine cracked, and when he pulled back, his eyes were shining with something warm and private. You're taking such good care of yourself, he said softly, just to me. It puts my mind at ease. I laughed, confused. I was a woman who reheated gas station coffee to save $4. Whatever was easing his mind, it certainly wasn't my bank account. Before I could ask what he meant, my sister called everyone to the table. My mother's hand landed gently on his arm and steered him away. I filed it under nothing. I was wrong to file it under nothing. We were halfway through dinner when my grandfather set down his fork and looked at me with that same warm light in his eyes. How's that check treating you, sweetheart? I thought he meant my paycheck. I thought he was making old-fashioned small talk about nursing wages. I'm getting by, I said. The hospital pays what it pays. Across the table, my mother set her water glass down one beat too hard. Then she turned the conversation sharply towards Sloane's latest client. Her voice bright and fast and just a little too loud. I noticed it the way you notice a rhythm change on a monitor. A flicker you can't unsee. My grandfather smiled gently and said he still had the card I'd sent him last month. That he'd stuck it right on the refrigerator. Best handwriting in the family. I sat very still. I had not sent him a card. Not last month. Not ever. My mother was on her feet before I could open my mouth, pulling him toward the den, her voice rising cheerfully over the moment like a wave washing away footprints in the sand. I sat at that table with a fork in my hand and one sentence looping in my head like a pulse I couldn't slow. How's that check treating you? Which check? I drove home with the radio off. And that question followed me all the way to my door. The next morning, the mail told me what my gut had already known. A thick envelope. Addressed to me. From an accounting firm I'd never heard of. In dry, precise language, it referenced annual gifts made on my behalf by Mr. Walter Hall, to Grace Anderson. Gifts. To me. There was a number inside that made me sit down on my own kitchen floor. $84,000. In the last year alone. I read it 4 times. I'm a nurse. I read charts for a living. The letter was not ambiguous. My grandfather had been gifting me, on paper, more than 3 times what I earned breaking my body every night shift. And I had never seen a single cent of it. My first instinct wasn't to cry. It was to verify. I pulled up 4 years of bank statements on my phone and scrolled all the way back. Line by line. The way you'd scan a medication list looking for an interaction. Nothing. Not one deposit. Not one partial payment. Nothing. Whatever my grandfather thought he was sending me had been landing somewhere that was not my account. I called my mother that night and kept my voice easy, casual. The practiced calm of a woman who has delivered bad news to families in the worst moments of their lives. Hey, Mom. Random question. Has Grandpa ever sent anything to me through you? A pause. Half a second too long. What on earth are you talking about? Her voice shifted into something softer, warmer, the tone she used when she wanted you to feel like you were confused. Honey, you're working yourself into the ground. Get some sleep. She hung up. I had just been managed. Gently. Expertly. In under a minute. I stared at the letter on the floor of my kitchen. And I started keeping every envelope. A week later, my mother asked me to come help clear out the spare room. And I said yes. Because saying yes was another muscle I'd overdeveloped. But I also said yes because I needed to get inside that house. While she made coffee in the kitchen, I sat at her desk where her laptop was open. And I did something I'm not proud of, and would absolutely do again. I scrolled. There they were. $7,000, deposited the first of every month. Regular as a heartbeat. And right beneath each deposit, within a day, an outgoing transfer. Same amount. Every time. To an account ending in 4 digits I recognized. Months earlier, splitting the cost of a gift for our grandfather, my sister Sloane had handed me a check from her account. I'd glanced at the number out of habit. Same 4 digits. The money came into my mother and went straight out to my sister. I photographed the screen with my phone. Hands perfectly steady. The gift of the job. A photo of someone else's bank account proves almost nothing on its own. I knew that. I was a nurse, not a lawyer. Suspicion isn't proof. You can be certain a patient is septic and still need the labs before anyone will act. I needed someone who understood how the law actually moves money. So I did the hardest thing I'd done in 7 years of carrying everything alone. I asked a stranger for help. I made an appointment at a free legal aid clinic. A 6-week wait. And I want you to understand what that tells you. That I called a clinic full of strangers before I would ask my own mother for the truth one more time. That's how far gone the trust already was. Dana Whitfield had a small office, a wall of binders, and the unhurried patience of someone who had watched a lot of families devour each other. She listened to every word without once suggesting I might be overreacting, which alone almost made me cry. Then she explained the machinery I'd been blind to. If someone signed your name on the back of those checks and deposited them into an account that wasn't yours, she said, that's a forged endorsement. The front of the check is perfectly legal, so the bank never questions it. The fraud lives on the back. I leaned forward. So if I pull the back of the checks? Dana shook her head slowly. You can't. You're not the account holder. You're not the pair. Only your grandfather, or law enforcement, can make that bank produce the endorsement images. I sat with that. So I need him to believe me, before I have the proof that would make him believe me. Dana nodded. That's the trap. His trust in your mother is the lock. She let that sit. Then she added the line that changed the temperature of the whole conversation. But understand what you're looking at, Grace. If your name was signed by someone else's hand to redirect your money, that's not a family disagreement. In Ohio, that can rise to forgery. That's criminal. I drove home doing new math. To get the truth, I needed my grandfather. To get my grandfather, I had to get past my mother. And she had spent 4 years standing precisely between us. 2 days later, my mother called with an assignment. Grandpa turns 80 next month, she said brightly. We're throwing him a big dinner. His house. All the family. His oldest friends. A pause. You'll handle the flowers, won't you? You're so good at the small things. The small things. I held the phone and looked at my file on the kitchen table, and understood with a clarity that felt almost like peace exactly what I had just been handed. Every person who mattered would be in one room. My grandfather. My mother. My sister. Trent. Aunts and cousins and his oldest friends who had known him for 50 years. Witnesses. You cannot rewrite a story that 30 people watched happen. Of course, I said. I'd love to do the flowers. And I started planning. First, I had to reach my grandfather. But my mother answered his phone, redirected his calls, managed his schedule with a smile and a firm grip on his elbow. So I did the one thing she wouldn't expect. I wrote him a card. A real card. In my own handwriting. I drove to his house and put it in his mailbox while her car wasn't in the driveway. Cuffy. Just you and me. No one else. There's something I need to ask you in person, and I need you to hear it from me. Then I waited. 3 days of silence. I worked my shifts. I taught my class. I jumped every time my phone lit up. On the third night, an unknown number called. I almost let it go to voicemail. I'm glad I didn't. Gracie. My grandfather's voice. Low and careful. Calling from a number I didn't know. I'm at Earl's place. I got your card. A pause. When he spoke again, there was something in his voice I had never heard from this man. An old man's hurt trying to stay steady. You want to see me without your mother there. I need you to tell me why, sweetheart. Because lately I've been feeling like something in this family isn't right, and nobody will look me in the eye and say it. We met at Earl's diner, in a back booth, just the two of us. And I did the hardest thing I'd done since my father's funeral. I told him the truth. Slowly, clearly, without accusation in my voice, because I'd practiced it until I couldn't hear the anger anymore. Then I laid one piece of paper on the table between the coffee cups. A cancelled check. One he had written himself. I'd been able to obtain a copy through his own bank, because it was his check and I had asked the right way. The front read in his own steady handwriting, "Pay to the order of Grace Anderson, $7,000. I watched him recognize his own writing. Watched a small smile cross his face the way it does when you see something you love. Then I said, "Turn it over, Grandpa." He turned it over. On the back was my name. Signed in a looping, confident hand that was not mine and had never been mine. Deposited into an account I had never owned. He stared at it for a long time. His thumb moved slowly over the forged signature. "That's not your writing," he said finally. It wasn't a question. "No," I said. "And I have never seen a single dollar of this money. For years of it." His hand began to shake. But his eyes went dry and hard. He reached slowly into his wallet and pulled out a small, worn card. The kind you keep because it means something. He set it next to the check. The handwriting matched perfectly. Loop for loop. "You sent me this," he said quietly. "For my last birthday. I carry it everywhere." I looked at a thank you note I had never written. In my name. In the same forging hand. "I didn't, Grandpa," I said. "I didn't even know you were giving me anything to thank you for." And I watched 4 years of a lie he had been living quietly rearrange itself behind his eyes. My grandfather wanted to drive to my mother's house that night and have it out. His hands were flat on the diner table and his jaw was set. I put my hand over his. "No," I said. "Not like that. If you go to her tonight, alone in her kitchen, you know what happens." He was quiet. "She cries. She explains. You're a man who loves his daughter. And by morning, she's halfway talked you out of believing your own eyes." He didn't argue. Because we both knew it was true. So I gave him a plan instead. I didn't ask him to rescue me. I asked him to hand me one tool only he could reach. "You wrote the checks," I said. "That means only you can authorize the bank to release the endorsement images. Every payment. All 4 years." He nodded slowly. And then we do it once, I said. In front of everyone at your party. Where she can't pull you into the den and rewrite it. Where 30 people see the back of that check at the same time. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, your grandfather built everything he has by never once being afraid of the truth, even when it cost him. His voice caught. Don't let me be afraid of it now. Even if it's my own daughter. We shook on it across that diner table. An 80-year-old man and his granddaughter. And for the first time in 4 years, I didn't feel like I was drowning alone. The authorization went to the bank on Dana's letterhead. And then came the part nobody tells you about when they describe justice. The waiting. I went back to work. I acted exactly normal. Sloane texted me about the flowers, what colors, what budget, and I replied like a woman who suspected nothing. My mother called to remind me to dress nicely for once. I said I would. Because a chart protects the patient when the shouting starts and memories get convenient. I was building a chart. One careful page at a time. 10 days before the party, my phone rang during a break. It was Dana. Her voice had changed. The images came back, Grace. All 4 years of them. A pause. You should sit down before I open this file. It's worse than the money. I sat in a supply closet under fluorescent light and opened what she sent. 4 years of checks. Every single one. My grandfather's handwriting on the front. My name forged on the back. Every one deposited by mobile capture into the joint account my sister held with her husband. Trent had set up the deposits. Sloane had signed my name. It was clean. It was complete. It was damning. But Dana had warned me there was more. Folded into the accounting firm's correspondence file were letters. Notes written over the years, in my name, in that same forging hand. Updates about my life that had never happened. Thank yous I had never sent. And one letter, dated 2 years back, written as me, asking my grandfather in my voice whether he might consider increasing the monthly help. Because, the letter said, Grace wants to go back for her nurse practitioner certification, and the tuition is steep. I had never written those words. I had never asked that man for $1. Someone had used my name, and my grandfather's love for me, to negotiate a raise on a theft. The stolen money was a wound. The forged letters were a plan. You can argue that taking money was a misunderstanding between family. You cannot argue your way out of signing someone else's name to ask for more of it. That signature, repeated, escalating, was the difference between a family argument and a felony. And it was all on paper now. The night before the party, I almost talked myself out of all of it. I called my oldest friend in nursing, a charge nurse named Renee, who had trained me and known me longer than anyone. I told her everything, rushed and unsteady, sitting in my car outside a grocery store. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Honey, you didn't break this family. They broke it 4 years ago." A pause. "You're not blowing anything up. You're just turning on the lights." I sat there with the phone against my ear and the parking lot buzzing around me, and something settled in my chest that had been wound tight for years. She was right. I hadn't forged a single name. I hadn't taken a single dollar. I hadn't lied to an old man about a granddaughter who loved him. All I was going to do was put the truth on a table and let people see what had been done in the dark, in my name, for 4 years. That wasn't destruction. That was a light switch. I drove home and slept. Actually slept. The party was beautiful. I'll give them that. My grandfather's dining room glowed with candles and white roses I had arranged myself. 14 people at a long table. Aunts and cousins. 2 of his oldest friends from his concrete pouring days. A quiet, gray-haired attorney named Holloway, introduced as a guest, sitting near the head of the table with a club soda and an unreadable expression. Sloane shimmered in something expensive, playing hostess of an evening she had funded with stolen money. Trent moved around the table refilling wine glasses, easy and smiling, completely unaware of what was coming. My mother sat at my grandfather's right hand, where she always sat today, the capable daughter who handled everything. And I sat near the far end of the table with a slim folder in my lap, and roses filling the air with their sweetness over a room that had no idea it was sitting inside a crime scene. I made small talk. I complimented the catering. I watched my family be warm and charming and fully convinced of their own goodness. I was the only one in that room who knew what was underneath the candlelight. Then my grandfather tapped his fork against his wine glass. The sound rang out clean and clear and stopped every conversation in the room. He rose slowly. Certain. The man who had built everything from nothing. Before we cut the cake, he said warmly, looking down the table toward me, I want to say something to my granddaughter. The room turned toward me. 14 faces lifted in the candlelight. Glasses half raised. Ready for the kind of sweet, brief toast that ends with everyone dabbing their eyes. My grandfather looked at me. And he asked the question he'd asked me 100 times before. The one my mother had spent 4 years quietly steering him away from at table after table. How's that check treating you, sweetheart? The table chuckled. Charmed. An old man fussing over his granddaughter. My mother's smile froze on her face like frost on glass. Down the table, Sloane's eyes snapped to me. Then to our mother, then back. I set my wine glass down. The room waited for me to say I was getting by. The way I always had. The way I had for years. And I felt underneath my ribs the strange, hollow calm I knew from the worst nights in the emergency room. The calm that comes when there is finally nothing left to do but the right thing. Funny you should ask, Grandpa, I said. And I reached down and opened the folder. I took out 3 checks and laid them in the center of the table, face up, side by side, where the candlelight caught the edges. Pay to the order of Grace Anderson, $7,000. Pay to the order of Grace Anderson, $7,000. 3 months out of 46. My grandfather's handwriting on every one. The table leaned in. Confused. Reading. Grandpa has been sending these, I said, and my voice came out level and clear. No heat. No tremor. $7,000 a month. For almost 4 years. To help me through. I paused. I never saw a single dollar. My mother's chair scraped back an inch. Grace. Her voice climbed into that warm, managing register I had heard my whole life. This is not the time. You're confused. Let's not do this at your grandfather's. Turn the check over, I said. I did not raise my voice. I didn't need to. The words dropped into the silence like a stone dropped into still water. And the whole table went quiet. Nobody moved. The string quartet had stopped. My mother's mouth was open. And my grandfather, standing at the head of his own table on his 80th birthday, reached down with a hand that did not shake at all, picked up the nearest check, and turned it over. So everyone could see the back. There was my name. Grace Anderson. Signed in a looping, confident hand. A hand that anyone who had ever known me would recognize, in an instant, was not mine. Deposited into an account that was not mine. The candlelight flickered on the paper. An aunt drew in a slow breath somewhere down the table. My grandfather read the forged signature out loud. Slowly. Every letter. Then he read the account number beneath it. Then he lifted his eyes. And looked, not at me, but at my sister. Sloane, he said, very quietly. The whole room had gone so still I could hear the candles burning. Is that your account number? Sloane's face drained to the color of the tablecloth. She looked at the check. At our mother. At the 14 faces now turned toward her in the candlelight. And she said nothing. Which was somehow louder than anything she could have said. Trent set the wine bottle down on the sideboard with a small, careful click. And took one quiet step back from the table. The way a man does when he realizes he is standing too close to something about to go off. I looked at my sister across the roses. I didn't sign that, I said. And a forensic examiner already knows whose hand did. Sloane came to her feet so fast her chair toppled backward and cracked against the floor. And then she came apart. Loud, fast, aimed directly at me. You jealous, miserable. You never spent a dime on yourself. You never wanted anything. The money was just sitting there. Her voice cracked across the dining room. You think you're so noble in your little scrubs? It would have rotted. We used it. We built something with it. I did not stand. I did not flinch. I had waited 4 years for the floor to drop. Now that it had, I found I didn't need to move at all. The truth was already on the table, face up and back up, and there was nothing anyone could do to put it back in the dark. My mother was crying now, reaching for my grandfather's sleeve. Daddy, I was going to pay back every cent. I swear to you, I was about to lose the house your son-in-law built. What was I supposed to do? Her words tumbled over each other. Desperate. The whole table watching a family come apart in real time. And through all of it, I stayed in my chair. I stayed quiet. I let them be loud. Because their noise was doing my work for me. When there was finally a breath in it, I spoke. Softly. So that they had to go still to hear me. Mom, I said. You told me you don't steal from family. You said you only borrow. I let the rose-sweet silence hold for just a moment. Show me the loan papers. She had none. There was no agreement. No record of my consent. No record of a single dollar returned. Because it was never a loan, and we both knew it. 4 years, I said, looking from my mother to my sister. 3 jobs. Your account. 3 small facts, laid down one at a time. And not one of them could be argued with. Then Holloway, the quiet attorney who had been a guest all evening, set down his club soda. I choose your next words carefully, he said, mild and precise. Signing another person's name to a negotiable instrument, and writing correspondence in that person's name to obtain more, that can rise to forgery under Ohio law. And very possibly theft by deception. This is the sort of thing a prosecutor takes seriously. It should be handled properly. Starting now. The word forgery moved around that table like a cold draft under a closed door. I looked at my mother. At my sister. And I said the last thing I'd planned to say. I don't need an apology tonight, I said. I stopped needing those a long time ago. What I need is the money returned and a proper report filed where it belongs. I closed the folder. The flowers are paid for. I'll send you the bill. And I stood up. And for the first time in my life, I walked out of a family dinner with my head perfectly level. I drove home through the dark with my hands steady on the wheel. The same steadiness I carry walking out of a room where we've lost a patient. That hollow, ringing calm that means the hard part is over, and the cost hasn't landed yet. I poured a glass of water in my own small kitchen and stood there quietly, letting myself breathe. Feeling, for the first time in weeks, like I could actually exhale. Then, just past 11, my phone rang. Dana. Far too late for good news. I almost let it go to voicemail. Grace, she said. I've been going through the rest of the accounting file with the forensic examiner. The letters. There are more of them than we saw. And you need to understand what they are. I sat down at my kitchen table. Over those 4 years, someone had written my grandfather a steady stream of notes in my name. Thank yous. Life updates that never happened. And requests. Including the one that raised the monthly amount from $5,000 to $7,000. And one more. Recent. Asking my grandfather to consider advancing 6 months at once, for a nurse practitioner program I had never enrolled in. It wasn't a one-time grab, Dana said quietly. It was managed. It grew. Every time he might have wondered, a letter in your handwriting reassured him. And asked for a little more. I closed my eyes. That's not borrowing money that happened to be sitting there. That's a pattern of using a forged identity to extract escalating payments. The checks alone, a sympathetic person might call a family mess. The letters are the part no one can explain away. They show intent. I sat in my quiet kitchen and finally, all the way down, understood what my mother had built. Not a moment of weakness. Not a desperate grab. A 4-year operation. Running on my name. And an old man's love. Designed to keep the money flowing. And to keep me drowning quietly. So I would never look up and ask. What happens now? I asked. Now, Dana said gently, it stops being something they can settle around a kitchen table. It didn't resolve overnight. It wasn't clean or quick. The forensic accounting put the diverted total at just under $280,000. A restitution agreement was reached, secured against my mother's house and what remained of my sister's business. The criminal report moved forward with the forged letters in the file. Forgery and theft by deception were not words a prosecutor waved away. Trent, it turned out, was happy to cooperate the moment his own name appeared on the paperwork. My grandfather changed his arrangements that same week. The money came directly to me now. No one in between. And the first thing he did with the remainder was establish a nursing scholarship in my father's name. Because, he said, his son-in-law would have liked that better than a watch. I dropped the weekend agency job. I kept teaching the CNA class. Because I wanted to. Not because I had to. And the strangest thing, the thing I still can't quite explain, is that for the first time in 7 years, I slept the whole night through, woke up before my alarm, and didn't reach for my phone to count what was left. I don't speak to my mother or my sister directly anymore. Not out of hatred. Not to punish them. But because everything between us now runs through lawyers and restitution schedules. And that distance is the only thing that finally lets me breathe. I didn't cut them off. I cut off their access to my name, my silence, and my money, which is a different thing entirely. On my own refrigerator, where my grandfather keeps a card he thought I wrote, I taped a photocopy of one cancelled check. Face up. Then turned to its back. The forged signature staring out at my kitchen every morning. Not to stay angry. To stay clear. Because protecting what is yours is not revenge. It is not cruelty. It is not betrayal of the family that betrayed you first. It is the rent you pay to finally live in peace. My father taught me to count before I react. It turned out he was teaching me something much bigger than he knew. He was teaching me that the truth, handled carefully, at the right table, in front of the right people, doesn't need to shout. It just needs to be turned over. And read. By the way, where are you watching this story from tonight? Let us know in the comments below. Because it truly is something to see how far these stories travel around the world.